Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's episode is brought to you by In the Reads. In the Reads provides beautiful, affordable artwork of the vibrant worlds found within your favorite books, TV, and films. From all wood bookmarks featuring illustrations and quotes from such fandoms as Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Outlanders, and more, to fantasy and real-life maps drawn in the style of Tolkien. Go to inthereads.com and check out what is available. Like something? Use code TALES10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. A link will be in the show notes along with the code. And now, let's get to the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. I am your host, David, and once again, we are back with another new episode, and I am excited to once again have a guest that is not here in the United States or Canada. I have a guest from England joining me today. I have Izza. You might know her on Instagram or Twitter as EvilCleverDog. Izza, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. Like I told you before we started recording, I've been following mostly your Twitter account for quite a while, from your cosplay and your tabletop role-playing work that you do, some of the threads you do in the comments and stuff that you post. And so it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and having someone from overseas is always something special for me.
Oh, well, I'm happy to represent my terrible country on your podcast.
Oh, it is my pleasure. We were actually in your country right as COVID started, and we were on like the last flight back to the States before they closed down like most of the airports. So
wow!
Like our trip got cut we only did like 3 of the things on our list, and everything got canceled, and we got refunded, thankfully. But
okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
One day we'll be back.
Yeah. Well, if you need a tour guide in London, let me know.
I will absolutely let you know, because that's where we were. We were like hanging out in London. We were like a block or 2 blocks from the big train station.
Which one?
I don't know.
London's just a series of roads that connect a bunch of big tube stations.
we were within walking distance of Harrods.
Okay, all right.
I can't remember the station name.
So probably, I think that's like South Kensington or something.
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar. It's a big station. So there's lots of stations.
There's a lot of big stations.
Yes. But you sent over probably one of the best lists of fandoms and stuff that you are into. And let me tell you, it's hard to like cut some of the stuff out. I'm like, I could have Izza on for like months of content. I mean,
I sent you a novel, and I'm very sorry.
Oh, don't apologize. I always love getting to see what people are into, and then having to like make the agonizing decision on what to cut down. But the first thing that we're going to talk about, which you have a number of things that like fall into this category because it's video games.
Yeah.
And there's one that I specifically want to talk about, but I'll start off generally with like, how did you get into video games? Is it like something, as a kid you got into? Was it something later on in life? Like where'd you get your start?
Yeah, from childhood. I was born in 1991, so the very first video games I played were like my dad's computer. We got this like weird Addy-Boo game and stuff like that, like little kids games. But then when I was a little bit older, maybe like, I guess like 7, maybe 8, my older cousin got me into Pokemon. And I remember him coming over to visit our house, and he brought his Game Boy, and I did not have a Game Boy. I just like played some games on my dad's computer at the time. And he brought over his Game Boy, his copy of Pokemon, and this like massive poster that had all the 150 first Pokemon on it.
Yes.
And he literally he laid it out on the floor, and he was like, okay, this is Bulbasaur, this is Charmer, and he went through like the whole thing. And I was like enraptured immediately, because as a little kid I was super into like, I loved animals, I loved dinosaurs, I loved like weird creatures and stuff. Me and my brother used to watch like Power Rangers and X-Men and Batman, so I was already kind of into like the comic cartoons and stuff like that. So I was just like, oh, look at these weird little creatures. I love them. And yeah, and so obviously there was also like the anime series and the cards and stuff. And yeah, I was like absolute perfect age to be one of those kids who was obsessed with Pokemon at the time when Pokemon was at its zenith. And from there, that same cousin also got me into like Final Fantasy. I remember him downloading an emulator and a ROM for Final Fantasy VI onto said dad's computer. And we were like absolutely addicted to it. So yeah, it was like Pokemon and Final Fantasy were sort of the two first big game series that I was like really, really into, and it all kind of sprawled out from there. Lots of RPGs and also like Harvest Moon and stuff like that as well. And yeah.
Oh gosh, like I remember that poster, or there's probably a couple of them floating around at the time, but I remember when the Pokemon video games came out. I remember when the Pokemon anime came out, and it's just like I can't imagine, because I was older when that happened, so it was not something that I was like super into. I got kind of shoved into being the Pokemon person for the store that I worked at.
Yeah.
Of okay, families are coming in with their kids and they're going to want to talk to somebody about Pokemon. Right. You can be that person. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll watch like some of the TV shows to understand what I'm getting into. But it's almost unimaginable to like be a kid, like think about like that experience as a like from like your point of view, essentially, to be like how major that was, like how just worldwide that like cards and games and shows was
wild to think back on, because I also based on my age was also sort of in that perfect age group for the like Harry Potter, His Dark Materials, sort of those big sort of surges of popularity as well. And obviously, now we look back on a lot of things about Harry Potter and but so I like multiple times there were these like huge like phenomenon level nerdy things that sort of shaped pop culture and to the level of like the news talking about like, oh, is it dangerous for kids to be obsessed with Pokemon and stuff like that as well. And like, I switched primary schools when I was it wasn't too long after that, actually, because I think I was around 8 years old. I moved to another school, and I remember I was having an interview with the head teacher because I was joining halfway through the school year. And my parents were there and they were talking about like, oh, she gets such good grades. She loves history. She loves art. She loves literature. She's great in school. Like showing off about how clever I was and how they wanted me at their school. And then the teacher turns to me and is like, and do you have any questions? And I'm like, yeah, have you banned Pokemon cards at your school? And I could see my parents' faces just being like, God fucking damn it. Is that like... like, don't ruin this for us. But it was huge. We at that school, because Pokemon cards were banned at that school, we still brought them in. We smuggled Pokemon cards into school because that's how big it was and how obsessed with it everybody was. And then there was like the Pokemon Digimon war as well, when Digimon came out, and it was like the rival to Pokemon. And I remember like my best friend at primary school, he was really into Digimon and I was really into Pokemon, and we always used to joke like, oh, we should be on opposite sides of the feud, but we just like each other so much. And going into like we had this like tire tunnel climbing frame thing, which you could just like completely climb inside and be completely hidden from the teachers inside it, which is like a great thing to put in a school playground. But that was where the like illicit Pokemon card smuggling, trading dealings went down. We would all like bundle ourselves inside there and get the Pokemon cards out of our socks and shoes and backpacks that we'd smuggled them in and like trade Pokemon cards inside there. And yeah, it's like wild to think about just how big of a craze it was, yeah.
That's an awesome story. Like, it's interesting to look back on and think about, because like my school, in high school banned Magic the Gathering cards.
Mhm.
And it's like, looking back on it now, it's like, why? Like, I understand why, because where we grew up, it was like the like the south of the Bible Belt in the United States, and it's like everything is scary to them. But
Yeah.
it's like banning Pokemon cards, like those. And now I'm thinking about it, like, man, if you still had your cards, I bet they'd be worth like a lot of money too.
I mean, I actually do still have my like original collection. I keep the folder up on my bookshelf so I can see it right now. And I know I have some stuff that's worth a lot. I've actually got a few things I'm thinking of selling soon, because I'm going to be like moving soon. But I also I kind of like being able to just pull the folder down off the shelf and be like, here, I've got like, from like I can't remember all the terminology, but from like that initial set, I have like a copy of every Pokemon at least once, basically.
Nice.
Even if it's not a shiny, or even if it's not like, the first edition or whatever, like, but there is, I can literally, and I have put them in like Pokedex order and just like kept them in that folder, because it's really like nice and nostalgic. And also just like from a perspective of now being like a designer and an artist, I really love the art on those cards. I think they're really beautiful, and they've never released like an art book of the art of Pokemon cards as far as I've seen. And I think like that's something I would buy. Like even with owning the cards, I would buy like a book where you could see all that artwork in like a bigger scale, high resolution. Because it's really beautiful, like the sort of Ken Sugimori art, and then the other artists they brought in as well.
Yeah, it's like I'm just thinking about like I look back at like my youth and childhood and all the stuff like I got rid of, and I'm like, I really wish I still had some of that. It'd be nice to just like even if it's just like on a shelf somewhere, like to be able to pull it off and be like, I remember this.
Yeah, there's certainly some things I got rid of that I regret, or that I lost, or whatever. Like there's a lot of my old video games, like some of my Pokemon cartridges just went missing because I was a kid, and stuff goes missing when you're a kid. At one point, I think I might have sold like my .hack games, which I really regret because they're like super expensive if I ever wanted to replay them, and really rare as well. Like the first one you can buy quite easily. The second one is a bit more expensive, and then 3 and 4 you just, when you find them, they're like £100. It's ridiculous. But I'm also the kind of person who like, I find it. This mostly comes in my like, crafting, cosplay, fabrication side, where I'm like, I can't get rid of it. What if I need it? What if I need this scrap of leather for some reason? I have to keep it. And I have trained myself into being better about getting rid of things. But I think that side of me also came through in the like, no, I'm going to keep my Pokemon cards. I don't care what my parents say. I'm keeping my Pokemon cards. And a few other things I managed to keep, which I'm quite happy that I did.
So you got your start with Pokemon, and then of course like Final Fantasy VI, which is one of the probably the one of the games that is so highly talked about and everything, and it's a game that I still haven't played yet.
Oh,
and
really?
Eventually I will play it, but I haven't played it yet. I don't know why. I know. Like I played 4 back in the day when it was just called
really
2.
Yeah, 4 is also really good. 4, 5, and 6 might actually be what I feel sort of capture that essence of Final Fantasy like the most for me personally. I also really love 10. 10 was one that I played when I got my PS2, which was my first like games console that wasn't like a Game Boy, so like a console that hooked up to the TV.
Right.
The PS2 was the first one I got, and Final Fantasy X was the first game I got for it, so I have like a lot of love for that game as well. But yeah, 6 especially, and 5 I think is like the undersung hero. I think 5 is really, really good. But 6 is like still on my very hard for me to curate list of games that I would say are like my favorite games of all time. Like Final Fantasy VI is still there to this day. And like that game, I look back on that game and I think about how formative it actually really was for me on like so many levels, because it was the first sort of not that I'm saying Pokemon isn't a real game. It absolutely is, and I hate people who do the whole, like, that game's not a real game nonsense. Right. But, like, you know, a game that had a slightly more serious tone and wasn't just aimed at children, that aimed to, like, tell a story. It was, like, the first game like that I played. And then on top of that, it has a female protagonist, arguably two female protagonists, and that the first female protagonist you play as, Terra, is this sort of fantasy allegory for being mixed race, which now as an adult, I have some feelings about how often that is implemented instead of actually just portraying mixed race people. But when I was a little kid who didn't really understand all my feelings about my family coming from lots of different places and having lots of different cultures and stuff, like, present in our family, it was this very, like, striking narrative and striking character to me that I really, really related to. And then on top of that, it's this very, like, the term they use in the game is magitech. It's like a sci fantasy story, not just a straight fantasy story. And the setting is very entrenched in, like, there being a lot of industry and technology and magic being used to advance technology, airships, mech suits, and, like, mining towns and industrial towns and stuff like that, alongside all the classic fantasy things and interwoven with it. And I think because that game was my very formative experience of video games, but also the fantasy genre, that's why I'm very, I have a lot of love for, like, sci fantasy and blending those two things together. And I'm very, like, eye-rolly about people being like, there shouldn't be guns and airships and trains in D&D. I'm like, no, put it there. Let there be technology and magic side by side and interwoven. It's cool. And it makes sense in a world building perspective, because if you have magic, then when technology develops, you obviously use magic to supplement it. It's cool. Let it happen.
Just let it happen, people.
Yeah.
We have formative years of experience of, you know, playing video games that have it in there from, you know, long time ago.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And if you do want to drag out the historically accurate argument, then guns have existed for a very, 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 very long time. Longer than people who try to put it forward as a historically accurate argument like to seem to think. So, you know, I don't like the historically accurate argument, because I think, like, well, it's fantasy, so you shouldn't have to put forward that argument. But the fact still remains that when people try to use that argument to talk about it from a historical accuracy level, whether it's, like, guns and technology or whether it's people of color and women being present in stories, it's like, well, actually, but you're wrong, though, on a historically accurate level anyway. So let us have fun in our fantasy world.
Absolutely. Now, I know, you know, people's games, game choices, game styles, the games that they're into change over time. What kind of games are you into now? Like, what catches your attention? What are you looking for in your video games that you play? I
think I personally am usually looking for a game that I feel is visually interesting, as well as, like, gameplay and story-wise interesting. You know, I have worked before the pandemic, I worked as a set and costume and prop designer for theatre. I'm a cosplayer. I'm moving into doing, like, prosthetics design. So, like, I like worlds that are visually rich and use their visuals to tell the story alongside every other aspect of narrative. And then, you know, also I'm looking for a game that's, like, engaging on a gameplay basis. That's, like, a given. And I do tend to gravitate towards games where I feel like they're not just recycling the same white man with brown hair and a beard over and over again. And I do feel like there are, thankfully, some more options if you want to play as, like, a female character, or slightly rarer for a character of color. White women seems to be where the game industry is at in terms of diversity right now, but there are some games that tend to push towards, like, more diversity than that, which is cool. But yeah, I love games like the games that Supergiant Games make, where they have this really strong visual style, as well as the music being a big part of that as well. And their games are always, like, super engaging and interesting. And then like Horizon Zero Dawn caught my eye when it first was, like, first even announced, for numerous reasons, like the whole It had a female protagonist. She had hair like mine. Cool. But then also the sort of aesthetic that they were marrying this idea of a sort of stripped down technology-wise humanity with like this uber advanced technology that is technically ancient to them, and like marrying those aesthetics together. I will also acknowledge that there's a lot of cultural appropriation of Native American aesthetics going on there, which I think was more readily apparent and egregious once the second game came out, that they maybe weren't as aware of that as they should have been. But I do think that the idea of having that sort of the juxtaposition in the visual style and how they managed to like interweave them into all these different outfits and like visual stories for multiple different groups of people, and having Aloy as the protagonist get outfits that were reminiscent of all the different tribes but also still remain distinctly Aloy is really, really interesting from like an art direction and visual design level. Yeah, so like, yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn, I wasn't as much of a fan of the sequel on multiple levels, like the story and stuff like that. I felt was like a lot weaker than the first game. But the first Horizon Zero Dawn game is like also like one of my favorite games. Pyre and Hades from Supergiant Games are like another two of my absolute favorite games. Journey, which again I connected to for the visual style, but also around the time it came out was around the time there was a lot of conversation about like what can video games be that isn't just stab a man in the face, shoot a man in the face kind of games over and over again. And Journey felt like it found a way to very beautifully handle having gameplay that is inherently peaceful and engaging and still goal oriented. I think it was like a really good example of that, and also just like tugs on the heartstrings. And admittedly the visual style they went with, the sort of it very much echoes some of the visual stylings of sort of like the Swana region. So on that level, it sort of appealed to me. And then another game I really love from the brand of games that I call like short indie games that usually make me cry is What Remains of Edith Finch, because again, it's one of those games where they are very much trying to be like, video games can be something different. They can tell a different kind of story. And they do it in a way where, you know, I think that game probably wouldn't exist without games like Gone Home and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. But it takes what those games did, and I felt like it advanced it a lot, and the story is like really beautiful, really well told. You sort of dip in and out of multiple characters' perspectives as you explore the old family home that they all used to live in. And it's one of those things that I feel like video games can do really, really well, where you get immersed into multiple different characters' headspace. And the way the game operates is different depending on who that character is. And, you know, you're literally experiencing how all of these characters died. So also on that level, it's very poignant and interesting to explore the idea of like mortality and death and how people react to it and stuff like that. One of those stories I feel like it probably couldn't be any other medium. And I think that's something really special to it being a video game, is like when people have the idea that video games can only be a certain thing. And usually when they have that opinion, you know, it's someone who looks at something like Call of Duty or whatever, and that's the stereotype they have, you know.
Yep.
And so I feel like being able to put a game like Journey or Edith Finch in front of them shows how games can be something very, very different. And I actually remember there was an exhibition here in London a good few years ago now, pre-pandemic times, so, you know, blurg time ago, at the V&A Museum, which was about video games. And it was an exhibition that very much set out to treat video games as an art form, with a lot of diversity, not only diversity in terms of like who makes them, but also in terms of the types of stories that can be told within them. So I went there one time. They had like a sort of cosplayer day, so me and a couple friends went there. You go there and cosplay, you get in for free, and they took photos and da da da. It was really cool. But because we were sort of there in cosplay, I didn't really get to like fully experience the exhibition as much as I wanted. So I went back and I decided to take my brother, who likes video games. And then we were like, Mum and Dad, would you like to come to this too? And I felt like it would be really interesting to kind of show these boomers, like, hey, I want to show you this exhibition that I think does a really good job of portraying the breadth of what the medium of video games can be. It's not just beep, beep, boop, boop, push button, kill man. And I remember actually talking to my mum about the part of the exhibition that was about Journey, because that had a whole section to itself there. And, my mum is where my South Asian and Swana roots comes from her side of the family. And she was very, very interested in Journey and drawn to the visuals like I was. And she did say, like, yeah, I feel like I understand a bit better now why you like this so much. That I can't, and she kind of did that thing that a lot of people say when they talk about Journey, where they kind of go like, I can't quite explain why, but I feel emotional when I think about this game, which I thought was really interesting because she's not someone who has the lexicon of video game, knowledge and like the knowledge of like the aspects of the medium it was drawing from and deliberately subverting in order to do that and get that reaction out of a lot of people. So I think it's interesting that reaction sort of carries across that divide, as it were. Yeah, I'm not saying I only like video games that are like super artistic and deep, I also love to play the new Tomb Raider games where I get to just climb around and adventure around and shoot things and stuff like that. And, still play the Pokemon games when they come out, usually.
Right.
And lately I've been playing a lot of Stardew Valley because I needed a game that was just like kind of chill but would keep me engaged. I was like recovering from some like medical treatments and stuff, and I was just kind of like bedridden and feeling crappy, and I was like, I had originally been playing Makai Kingdom, which is this like strategy RPG, and I was kind of like, this game is fun and I have a lot of nostalgia for it because that's another game I got really into when I was a kid, but God, I don't want to be playing a strategy RPG right now. And decided to replay Stardew Valley because I hadn't played it since like 2018. And so yeah, that's what I've been playing for a month.
and there's so much more to Stardew Valley now.
Yeah.
Like, they just keep making it better.
Yeah. There's stuff in the game where I'm like, did I just not find this the first time I played it? Or was it added in after? So yeah, like the whole Ginger Island thing I don't think was in the game when I first played it. But I definitely didn't like get to the level 100 of the Skull Cavern the first time I played it, but I definitely went to the desert.
Right.
So yeah, there's just like so much in that game. I saw a tweet earlier today actually that was someone being like, I think I know a lot about Stardew Valley, and then I watched one YouTube video and realized I don't know anything about Stardew Valley. And I was like, that's how I felt when I started playing it after not having played it since like 2018, 2017. I was just like, wow, I know nothing about this game.
I watch a number, because I consume my video games through watching people on Twitch play them, and there's a number that play Stardew Valley, and I think I love that everyone plays it so completely different, and that there's so much in the game to do that one person may do something and the other person may have no clue what like that even is, because it's so expansive now. Yeah,
it's wild. So yeah, I'm year 3 on my farm. I'm married to Maru. I'm trying to get to the point where we can have a kid, but like she doesn't, like the prompt doesn't come up. And I'm like, Maru, come on. I want to have a kid. So yeah, and I have the like river farm. Last time I just did the basic farm, and this time I was like, oh, I mean, the river farm, like I looked at all the maps of all the farms and stuff, and I was like, oh, the river farm doesn't have like as much space on it, but I kind of like how it forces you to have like a unique layout and think about where you're placing things. So I was like, oh, that big chunk down there, that's where I'll keep all the animals. And then like that chunk over there can be where the fish ponds go. And then that chunk over there can be where I actually do the farming and stuff like that. It satisfies me viscerally on like I like to visually plan out where things go and make them look nice kind of level, which was also why I liked Harvest Moon, and also why I liked The Sims and stuff like games like that when I was a kid, you know?
They just hit that certain spot where it's like, okay, my brain is engaged on like so many different areas and levels. Just like,
Yeah.
let me get at it.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, like earlier this year, I played another game that's got like a similar vibe, which was Spiritfarer, which I really loved. Have you played it too?
I watched a playthrough of it, and like emotionally damaging.
Yeah.
For me,
very much exists in that category of like short indie games will make me cry.
Yep.
Like, again, another game about like death and how we interact with the concept of death and stuff like that, and like beautiful emotional stories with all these characters that you take on your journey with you and then have to say goodbye to. Also kind of reminded me in that aspect of Pyre, the whole the aspect of the game about like, you know, you train up your team, but ultimately the goal of Pyre is to release members of your team and send them back to the Commonwealth and let them be free. So you have to kind of juggle the idea of like, well, I need people who I need my best team members, and I need my favorite characters to stay around so I can see more of their story, but eventually I have to let them go. And there's a cutoff point where you can't let any more of them go in Pyre, which means you have to decide who also stays behind forever. But in Spiritfarer, the idea is literally like, you spend time with these characters and then you let them go. And there's something really beautiful about that. I enjoyed that the one character you can't let go is Buck, who ended up being my favorite because he's the character who's like this little dragon. And his whole thing is like, I'm a DM and I play legally distinct Dungeons and Dragons with my friends. And that's my whole thing. And his whole quest was like basically doing quests for him interspersed with like him DMing a game for you, which was really cute. But yeah, so you have this whole like emotional aspect of it, and then, you know, also the whole thing of like, I want to make my boat look nice. I want to make my boat super functional, but also look cool. And and then my brain goes like, yes, make it look pretty, make it look aesthetic.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that game, following along, and then even just because the person I followed was like telling the story about like how all the characters are connected to people in the real world, and just, oh my, like it's just, you know, I follow these people on stream and they play these video games and then they're crying on stream and I've got tears in my eyes because I've been on the journey with them. And it's like these games that are coming out now are just in like the what you said, the short indie games that make you cry. Like there are so many of them where it's like, not again.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah. What's really embarrassing is when you've already played the short indie game that made you cry. Or even, like, it doesn't even have to be a short indie game that makes you cry. Like, I cried at the end of Horizon Zero Dawn. Like, the final scene where Aloy goes to Elizabeth's old house. I bawled my eyes out. But what's really embarrassing is when you've already played the game and already cried and had the emotional reaction, and then you, like, watch a scene again on YouTube, or you, like, watch a review or someone playing it or something, and so you see it again, and then you cry again, and it's like, I knew it was coming! And yet... And yet, I'm a baby.
I'm right there alongside you. There are things like there'll be TV commercials or movies that I've seen 20 or 30 times, and we'll watch them again, and it's like, why do I have tears in my eyes again? Like, God. Stop! Can you stop like for 30 seconds and just move on? Yeah,
the movie that I say, like, I don't even know why, because it's not like I even have a personal connection to the reason why the story makes me cry, but the movie Arrival just gets me every single time I watch it. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times, and every time I've cried. And because I've been rewatching it, usually that means I've been showing it to someone else, and then I have to cry in front of another person.
Oh my goodness.
It's a really good movie. It will probably make you cry. But it's also a really good deconstruction of, like, communication theory and language in a sci-fi setting. It's really good. People should watch it.
Absolutely. I second this. I really enjoyed the movie. I did not cry, though.
Okay, that's fair.
I will say that. But, yeah, it's like, we do like a Friday family movie night with the kids, and I
Mhm.
was like, I really love to show them this movie, but
Oh
I
God.
don't think that they would understand it at all yet.
Yeah, that's a lot. I don't know how old your kids are, but like for anyone who's like under a teenager, I can imagine that being like a lot of a movie to handle,
Yeah,
just like
I mean,
conceptually.
yeah, they poo poo on a lot of our old 80s and 90s movie choices. It's like, come on, guys, like just get with the program here. So on top of like all the video game stuff, one of the things, and you mentioned it while we were talking, is prosthetics.
Mhm.
And prosthetic effects, and you're actually going to be doing a master's in prosthetics.
Yeah, probably. I mean, at the time of recording, I'm like a couple weeks away from like moving to start it, and then by the time this comes out, I'll probably be already doing it.
Which is awesome. So be
Yeah.
sure to check out Iz's socials to see what she's actually doing. If she, hopefully you'll post about it and be like, "Hey, look at what I did."
I'm sure I will. I'm
Um,
sure I won't be able to stop myself because I'm that kind of person.
Now, how did you get into prosthetics? Because obviously, and we'll be talking about cosplay
Mhm.
in a little bit, but like prosthetics is a whole nother thing. Like it's a whole new like creative like endeavor.
It's sort of new, but it's also not completely new in some ways. So yeah, I've cosplayed for a really really long time, and some of the things I've done in cosplay are skills that are used in prosthetics, like sculpting and mold making, and stuff like that. But the way I really got into like the skill aspect of it was actually um, when I was doing my undergraduate, my BA, when I was studying design for performance, which was a sort of generalized course for set costume and prop design, mostly in theatre, some of it in film and television. Um, and when you're in the second year, you have to semi specialize in an area, which basically gets divided into set or costume. And I think a lot of people expected me to do costume because I'd come in being like, yeah, I cosplay and stuff like that. Um, but I looked at what we actually would have studied on either side of it, and I realized if I went into costume, I'd just be sitting in one room sewing for an entire half a year,
Hmm.
which didn't really appeal to me too much. And I realized if I went into the set specialization, I would do scenic painting and prop making and mold making and body casting and sculpting, and some prosthetics happened to be in there as well. And that was all the stuff I loved the most. Like, even when I cosplayed, I always liked the aspects of it that I call like the messy aspects the most. And so I specialized into set instead of costume. Um, and yeah, when we got down to doing stuff like body casting, sculpting, mold making, designing like props and unusual things like creature masks and stuff like that, I like really, really loved that. And I also I did like a work placement in a prosthetics department on a now long cancelled TV show called Da Vinci's Demons, which was terrible. No one should watch it. Although if you do watch it, just know that in season 2, there's like a 5 to 10 second clip that is actually me of like a throat being slit. Because when I worked on the set, we had like a mishap with one of the throat appliances. And by the time it was all fixed, the actress had gone home and they were like, this is actually kind of bad. So season 2 of Da Vinci's Demons was... So Da Vinci's Demons was basically, we want to make another show like Sherlock and have like an asshole man main character who's like a mega genius, so even though he's a dick to everyone, everyone worships him. And we'll do that by using Leonardo da Vinci as our main character. It was not good. And then in season 2, there's this whole weird story where they like go to South America and do very racist shenanigans in South America. And I was there when they were filming season 2. And the reason they used me as the body double is because I was the quote unquote only person on set with the same skin color as the actress. So I got to have my throat slit on Da Vinci's Demons, which was actually quite fun. To actually like feel what it was like to have the appliance like put on me and stuff. Like I always feel like an advantage that people like cosplayers do have going into professional work is that we've made stuff for ourselves, so we know what it feels like to wear it.
Right.
And so we understand what the actors are going through, and we understand maybe how to make it more comfortable for them, or how to like reassure them that like, yes, this might be uncomfortable, but don't worry, it's going to be okay, or something like that. So yeah, like I feel like that was quite an interesting experience for me. And then a show I designed in my third year, because when you're in the third year of the course, you are actually like designing shows that are put on at the university in the theatres. You know, there are like acting students there too, so they perform in the shows. There are stage management students there, so they stage manage the shows. We have like a whole internal like production team, basically. And one of the shows that I was given the script for and then immediately went like, that's mine, I'm doing that one, was a show called Pomona, which was newly written for us to design. It was part of this thing called like the New Writers Season, where they brought in sort of younger writers, I think they were like mid-20s kind of, to write brand new shows that kind of had more of a finger on the pulse of like things young people wanted to be working on. Yeah, I just immediately like grabbed this one up. It was called Pomona, and it was very like influenced by sci-fi and horror. I'm not a fan of Lovecraft for numerous reasons, but the writer was clearly very influenced by Lovecraft, which meant that there were a lot of aspects of the stuff that's like more interesting and less problematic of that in there, the sort of existential horror, and like Cthulhu was literally a character in the play. And there's a group of characters, or sorry, a pair of characters in the play who play legally distinct Dungeons and Dragons with each other. And it's actually probably more like Call of Cthulhu, really, looking back on it. At the time, I didn't play tabletop games, so I kind of understood it on like a vague, I'm a nerd who knows about nerdy things level, but I didn't understand it on like the level I would understand it now. Looking back on it, it's probably more like Call of Cthulhu, because it is meant to be like this horror game where the main character is running from Cthulhu constantly. And while also telling the story about like girls who go missing in a city and the lengths that people have to go to survive in like a destitute urban area that's devoid of like industry and prospects and stuff like that. And then interweaving those kinds of stories with these like fantastical, surreal, sci-fi horror mixture elements. And it was really, really good. So yeah, so for that play, because Cthulhu is this character in it, there is often present on stage a character wearing a Cthulhu mask. So I got to design and make that mask, which was very much the process of like prosthetics, is sculpting, molding, casting, and then on top of that, it's also related to something that's in that sort of genre that prosthetics is often used for. And then that play was like really, really well received, and actually ended up having a production done at some other theatres, and ended up having a production done eventually at the National Theatre in London. And they kept using my mask. I was, at the time that production first started running up, I had only just graduated, or I was about to graduate, so they were never going to let me design the actual production because I was, you know, freshly graduated. But to the credit of the director and the writer, they were like, Izza is part of the language of this play now, and they wanted to use the mask again. And even though I wasn't experienced enough to design at a theatre at that level yet, they brought me in to do like scenic painting and assist the designer a few times. So I got to stay with that play for a really, really long time, which was really cool. Awesome. It was really, really cool. And it meant that I can say I worked on a play that was at the National Theatre in London really early on after graduating, which was awesome. And then because of that play and the confidence it gave me in like knowing I really enjoyed the process of designing that mask, like a strange, fantastical creature, and the process of sculpting and molding and casting it. And then because of also my interest in like sci-fi and fantasy and stuff, I ended up getting hired for a lot of plays that were sci-fi, fairy tale, or like horror type stuff, like genre fiction type plays. So I ended up making a lot of masks. I ended up doing a lot of like making armor, making creature masks, animal masks, puppets, and stuff like that. So that aspect of prosthetics, I feel like I've actually done like quite a lot of. And I also, I've done some like indie films and stuff that were like post-apocalyptic horror, creature stuff. So going into applying for the prosthetics MA, I was like, look, this is my experience. I've done a lot of like mask design and making, creature design. I've done cosplays where I've done similar things, lots of armor, lots of props, lots of masks. What I don't have is the experience in the actual like makeup side of it yet. But they loved that. And they were like, yeah, don't worry about that. You'll learn the makeup stuff on the course. Like
Nice.
Yeah, and it was really cool because I was worried that not knowing much about actual makeup might be like a fault they might see, but they actually seemed to see it as like a benefit that I came from a design background first. So I already have like the design principles and the experience of like working as a designer in the industry, making things to a schedule and a budget, and working with very similar premises and materials and stuff like that already. I think they saw as a bonus, I hope. So yeah, and a lot of the stuff, as I said, like being very into sci-fi and fantasy and post-apocalyptic stuff, a lot of the movies and TV shows that I love, like, Mad Max Fury Road and Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff like that, means that a lot of the stuff I was watching contained a lot of prosthetics. And so just over time, and then with the shift of the pandemic, meaning that a lot of my theatre work evaporated overnight, I basically realized like, oh yeah, I have the skills for this, and it will mean that I get to transfer my skills from working mainly in theatre to working mainly in film, which is unionized and better paid than theatre, and also means that I get to work on things that I'm probably going to really, really love. Like I'll have the skills to be able to work on things like superhero movies and sci-fi movies and fantasy movies and stuff like that. Whereas in theatre, I did get hired onto a lot of those things, but I also had to work on like a bunch of period pieces that I wasn't super into, or like stuff where it's just they wear modern clothes and are modern people, which is fine, but isn't the most exciting thing. And it was always the projects that had a slant towards the fantastical and the surreal that I enjoyed the most. And I was like, the other thing as well, God, I feel like I've been rambling forever, is that in film, they want you to be highly specialized usually. And in theatre, you can be a generalist. And I had been a generalist in theatre for a long, long time, but knowing that I had things that were like kind of unique selling points or specialisms that I had always kind of, I've done like a lot of different jobs on a lot of different sort of indie film productions. I've been a costume designer, I've been a production designer, I've been a creature designer, I've been a set decorator, I've done a prosthetics placement, and so I kind of hopped around all these different jobs, which in theatre often the designer will be that one person who does all those things or oversees all those things with assistants.
Mm-hmm.
But in film, they want you to specialize, and that was the problem I always had with trying to work in film, was that I didn't know what I wanted my specialism to be, to allow me to still do the things that I wanted to do. And I think I just gradually realized over time that prosthetics was a really good way to get to do that, because I would be getting to work in a lot of the genres that I liked, with a lot of the skills that I liked. I would get to do the quote-unquote messy work, which I really enjoy doing. When you work in prosthetics, you can both design and make. You don't have to just do one or the other. So yeah.
That's really awesome. I know you felt like you were rambling and going places, but for someone to just getting to sit back and listen and not only learn, but to hear like the joy that you have for what you're doing is just so wonderful.
Oh,
and
thank you.
like just super like that. Like, again, Tales from the Fan, like we talk about all sorts of stuff, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk about something like so specific and so unique to you, and like your journey, like through the process, just really fun.
Thank you.
I guess my only question is once you finish, once you get into like you've done like all the prosthetic school and have done that, like like wildest dream, what project would you love to like something a Star Trek, or like, oh my goodness, like this comic character that I love, they're finally getting a movie, I'd love to do their work. Like what would your ideal like goal, dream position be for prosthetics?
God, I mean, so obviously first season of Miss Marvel has already been and gone, but hopefully that show gets a second season. I would love to work on anything related to Miss Marvel. That is a character I feel a very strong connection to. Whether that was like, you know, a season 2 of Miss Marvel, or Miss Marvel's in another film, or whatever. And a lot of Marvel stuff is shot in the UK. I don't think Miss Marvel was, from what I remember, but, you know, there are chances to make the connections to be able to, like, do that, hopefully.
Right.
And then, yeah, I would love to work on Star Trek. I think that the modern Star Trek series and the modern Star Trek movies have like some of the most like impressive alien makeup. Like Star Trek Beyond in particular, which I actually rewatched yesterday because I was like reading some of my prosthetics books, one of which is about Star Trek Beyond, and I was like, you know what, I want to watch this movie again. And Discovery, I think, just have like such impressive alien makeups in them, like Saru in Discovery, and I can't remember the character's name, but there's like a couple characters in Star Trek Beyond, the 2 female aliens, one of whom has the sort of like crab claw looking head that opens up at the back, and then there's the one who's got the sort of spiral sort of shell like head. Just like stunning alien makeups. And Strange New Worlds as well, which I just love as a series in general. So yeah, if those series, I'm pretty sure, just exclusively shoot in the US, but so that I feel like is like the more far-fetched dream, just because it would require somehow me making enough connections to be able to like go to the US to work on that. But yeah, I would love to work on Star Trek, Star Wars as well, but Star Trek I think is more where my heart would lie in terms of prosthetic stuff, and just like in terms of like what I would love to be able to say I worked on. But you know, it's not like I would turn down working on Star Wars. So yeah, those are like the sort of you know, the big like franchisey type things, you know, Marvel, Star Wars, Star Trek. But then I also watch movies like The Green Knight, and Everything Everywhere All at Once, and those sort of the A24 produced films that are just like so creative and do so much interesting visual storytelling with like a fraction of the budget that Disney and Lucasfilm have, and do such beautiful things. And I would love to work on something like that. Yeah, God, the prosthetics in The Green Knight was so good.
I still need to watch that movie. It was on my list, but I don't think it ever got released into theaters. Like, not any of the theaters that I go to here.
It had like such a weird... it was quite frustrating, because I was like, that's like the one movie that I would risk going to the cinema to see during a pandemic, and it didn't come out in the UK for so long. And then by the time it did, I think the numbers had risen again, and I just didn't feel comfortable to go. But I did watch it through Amazon Prime, and it was like the makeup job on the Green Knight himself was just like so cool, and all the visual aspects of that movie I think are absolutely stunning.
I will watch it one day. One day, I swear. Now, you mentioned Miss Marvel, and again, we've been talking through the podcast, and we've been touching on you know, characters and cosplay. And one of the characters, probably the first character that I ever saw of yours that you had cosplayed, was Miss Marvel. And it's almost to the point of, dang, that character, you did that character so well, it's like almost like an instant follow. I was already following you at that point, but it's like, you know, I got to go follow your Instagram too, because I think it was like I had followed you on Twitter for a long time, and then it's like, oh, Instagram, yeah, that's a thing too. But how did you first get into cosplay? Like, where did you get your start, and why were you interested in dressing up as characters?
So I went to my first like comic convention, geek convention when I was 13, when I was a tiny baby. And I'd already so like me and my brother loved to play dress up a lot when we were kids. I have like very specific memories of when the prequel Star Wars movies came out, and we were like little kids, so to us we were like, oh, cool movie, as opposed to getting mad about it. And I have like very specific memories of like, I think we were like temporarily living in Wales at the time because my dad was working on a production over there, and we had this like big countryside field at the house we lived in, and we would like run outside with sticks and like wrap ourselves up in robes and like paint each other's faces. Like I painted his face to look like Darth Maul, and he painted my face to look like Queen Amidala, and then we ran outside with sticks pretending they were lightsabers and beat each other to death. And we had all these like superhero costumes and stuff like that. And I do actually remember like making some costumes for like fancy dress party type things, which were, I guess you could technically say, were cosplays, because I wasn't like, going to the costume shop and buying a Disney princess costume. I was going like, oh, I like Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. I'm gonna cut up my mum's favorite jacket and make a Squall costume for this birthday party. But I didn't know what cosplay was, and I went to my first convention when I was 13, and saw people cosplaying there, and was just like, oh, whoa, people do this like just for fun when they come to a convention. That's cool. And being a kid who was super into like art and drawing, and I loved designing and making up characters and stuff like that, I was just like, I was all in from jump. And so the next time I went to a convention, which was like the same convention the following year, they have it twice a year, so I must have gone like to the autumn one first when I was 13, and then by the time the next one rolled around I was 14 in the spring. And my first cosplay, I guess, was a Naruto character whose name I am now struggling to remember because it's been that long since I gave a shit about Naruto. I think their name was Haku. They had like a green and white robe and like long brown hair. And my mum made the majority of that cosplay for me, but was like teaching me about sewing and stuff while she was doing it. Because it also just so happens that her mum, my grandma, was a seamstress. And she, wasn't in a state to teach me sewing by that point, but my mum had picked up a few tricks from her. So I kind of got a bit of knowledge about sewing, and then coupled that with my love of like painting and drawing and making and constructing things, and did a lot actually of cosplays that were sort of my own twist on a design, I guess. It wasn't the only thing I did, but I remember making like a Red Mage, like a Final Fantasy inspired Red Mage cosplay that was like, because I was an awkward like 15-year-old goth at the time. It was like lots of like stuff I'd bought and customized from Camden and stuff like that, but I was like exercising creative muscles, I guess. And yeah, I just kept going to what is now called MCM London, but was back then called London Expo, which is this twice yearly big London convention. It's our like biggest convention, I guess. And I, by luck of living in London, happened to not be very far from being able to just go there every half a year. So every half a year I would have a new cosplay, pretty much, sometimes even two. And yeah, I just sort of just picked characters that I liked and stuff. At one point I cosplayed Terra from Final Fantasy VI. I cosplayed Black Canary. To my embarrassment, I did a lot of Kingdom Hearts cosplay at one point. And like Naruto and stuff like that. But we all have to have our weeb phase. And then I got into Transformers big time, because robots are cool. And that was, I'd already done a few of those cosplays like the Red Mage where I was sort of designing and making the thing. But when I got into Transformers, to start off, you're like, oh, well, how would you even make a robot? When you're like 16, 17, you're like, how would I make a robot? That's so much. So I did like a design of a Transformers character if they were a human, which in the Transformers fandom we call like humanized Transformers. And I did like a Starscream and Megatron and Soundwave, not Soundwave, I did Jazz. And then I started getting more into actually trying to make like mech suit type things.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, which was basically because when I went to uni to study theatre design, I was way too busy to cosplay and go to conventions because the hours we had to do on that course were just wild. I actually remember them saying to us, like, you do the second highest number of contact hours in the whole UK under medical students. And I'm just like, bro, it's just theatre. Like, why does it have to be so intense? But the training is like, you have to learn so much in the training. So that's why. But also they were probably a bit too intense about it. Like I actually remember after I left, they actually changed some things because people in our year complained about how intense they were with us. But anyway, I came out of that course. Actually, no, it was in my third year. In our third year of that course, we got to do two like entirely self-guided, self-made projects. And so for one of them, I was like, okay, I need to do something that's going to get me top marks. So I did a conceptual set and costume full design for, conceptual as in like the production doesn't actually happen, production of Stephen Sondheim's Pacific Overtures, which is a musical that I really love. And then for the other one, I was like, well, they only actually count the marks of one, which will always be the highest one. So I'm going to do something weird. I'm going to make a Transformer because I'd been studying like prop making and set building and scenic painting and all this stuff, which were things I already sort of, had done in cosplay, but to a much, much lower standard. And I felt like, oh, now I wanted to see if I can make a cosplay to like an uber high standard, something that's like really, really complex. And I'd seen some people make like Transformers as like mech suits before. So yeah, I just like threw myself into it. I made the Spark Eater from Transformers More Than Meets the Eye, who talk about wanting to throw myself into the complexity, into like the most complex thing I could do. He is a character who appears in 2, I think, issues of one comic run, has arguably the most complex design because he's sort of like a Transformers zombie / vampire. He's like, the Spark is like the heart of the Transformer kind of thing in like, God, we're going to talk about ridiculous Transformers lore. The Spark is like the heart of the Transformer, and the Spark Eater is like a Transformer who is so like deprived for so long of sustenance that they just like basically become unhinged and seek out like eating the sparks of other Transformers. So sort of a zombie, sort of a vampire type thing. And so because of that, he's like this Transformer who's been locked on a ship for like years and years and years, and that's why he's gotten into this state where he's the Spark Eater. So he's all like decrepit, and like parts of his plating are like broken away and rusting and rotting and stuff like that. So it was like really complex because I was thinking not only on the level of like make armor for the first time, make a robot suit for the first time, but also what did this robot look like before he was broken and left on a ship for like hundreds of years or something, I think it was in the story. And what does the plating look like as it's broken away, as it's rusted? So it was like really, really hard, and it took me like the majority of the year to actually finish it. Like I was still working on it throughout doing all my other projects for the year. But that was my first foray into like armor making, which is now my main thing in cosplay. And there are like a million bajillion things I would do completely differently if I did that again now. Like the feet were completely out of proportion with the rest of it. There wasn't enough mobility in the legs. I put like, I don't know why I did this, but I was going off principles of puppetry design, which I'd done. We did like a puppetry project in the first year of uni, and where we made a lot of puppets where the joints were like pieces of wood held together with leather, held together with like really, really strong glue. So I was like, oh yeah, if I want the feet to move and be like articulated, I should put slabs of wood in the bottom of the feet and hold them together with leather. And I'm just like, why the fuck did I put wood in the bottom of the feet? I could not walk in that thing. Like, I mean, I could, but I like barely. And I remember like someone trying to help me up the stairs at a convention in it, and I'm just like, yeah, I can't walk upstairs. I have to go up a ramp because the feet were so big, and they're like these pointed, spiked feet. It was ridiculous. It was utterly ridiculous, but it looked so cool.
I'm actually looking at the picture right now. I found it on your Instagram. I had to scroll a while back,
yeah.
but it is like, I cannot believe like the whole design, the look of it. Like it is stunning work.
Thank you.
Like, yeah, I can't imagine the walking. Like I always tell people, I'm like, I don't know how people do it, like walking in the big mech suits and stuff that people are building.
So hot and so uncomfortable. Yeah, and that one as well, like on top of it just being a mech suit, it has claws, so I can't use my fingers properly. I make the stupid decision to put wood in the bottom of my feet, so the feet are really heavy and I can barely walk in them. And they're like big and pointy, so I can't walk upstairs. And it has like tentacles coming out the back. And I can barely see in it. And it just, oh my god. But I went to Auto Assembly, RIP, no longer exists, Transformers Convention. And I like won the cosplay contest with it, and I was like, hell yeah, this is so cool. And yeah, it made me see that like the training I'd gotten at school was very transferable to other things. And I started working as a theater designer freelance, and didn't really have time to get back into cosplay, but I still spent like a whole year working on another Transformers cosplay to take to the same convention the following year, which was Nautica from the same comic series, who's like one of my favorite characters from that series. She's great, love her. And yeah, so I improved on some things. I think just by basis of that character's design, that cosplay doesn't quite look as impressive as the Spark Eater. But I definitely I learned a lot making that cosplay too. And then, yeah, I sadly didn't really get to attend conventions and do cosplay much after that for like a while, because working freelance in theatre, you are overworked and underpaid and you have no time for yourself. But that kind of starts to grate on you after a while. And I remember actually, because obviously, yeah, I've made a lot of cosplays since then as well. So like the way that came about was, I remember just searching on YouTube for like a video about a particular like fabricating skill or something, for a project that I was working on. And I came across the Punished Props YouTube channel, which is a married couple who do like cosplay tutorials and build videos and stuff like that. And I just kind of got engrossed for like an evening, like watching their videos and kind of like revisiting this world that I hadn't really been able to get back into fully since going to uni and graduating. And I remember watching those videos and just being like, I have all these skills. I know all these things. I can do all these things. I just struggle with feeling like I have the time. And it just so happened that around that time I had gotten access to a studio to work in. So I kind of set myself a challenge, because I think around this time, it must have been winter of 2016, because that was when the Skyrim like anniversary edition or special edition or something was coming out, and the video series that Punished Props were currently making was building the steel armor from Skyrim, and it was like a promotional thing for that Skyrim special edition or HD edition or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I just kind of I watched all the videos, and they had like a free pattern that you could download to follow along with the videos and make your own cosplay. And I was like, okay, I can download the pattern, which will save me some time. And I'll probably have to modify it because it's made for a man. And, I'm a short woman. So I won't feel like I've fully stolen the pattern, But it will save me a lot of time, and I can just work on this cosplay in one side of my studio, and if I finish it, and if I love the process, and if I wear it to a convention and I have a good time, I'm going to get back into cosplay, because I miss having creative hobbies that are just for me. Because the thing they don't tell you when you go and study a creative subject is that all your favorite hobbies become your job, and then you love doing those things, but your mentality about them does shift no matter how much you love them. You know, I stopped drawing for pleasure. I stopped making things for pleasure because I associated it with work, or I didn't have the time to do that, because every time I would sit down and draw for pleasure, I'd be like, but I should be working, so I should be drawing something that's like a costume design for this thing or whatever. So yeah, so I did that. I built that costume. I had a really good time making it. I learned a lot from making it as well. Like I did already have some of the the relevant skills, but I bought new equipment. I learned how to use new tools. And yeah, I finished the costume and I was like so happy with it. I thought it looked so cool. And then some friends of mine, some like old cosplay friends of mine who I, kept in touch with but hadn't been going to conventions with them, were going to London Super Comic-Con, which no longer exists, sadly, which happened to be being held at a location that was like essentially a 20-minute bus ride from my house. So I was like, okay, cool. How do you feel about me joining you for this? I haven't been to a convention that wasn't a Transformers convention to cosplay in like 5 years by that point, I think. And they were just like welcoming me back with open arms. So I went to that convention. My friend convinced me to enter the cosplay contest, which I was a little iffy on because I hadn't fully made the pattern. But they were like, people enter cosplay contests with bought sewing patterns, so why is this any different? And you modified the pattern. So I was like, okay, cool, yeah, I'm going to enter. And I won, which was just like, if I had been looking for the affirmation of like, if you enjoy cosplay, get back into it, you deserve to have a creative hobby. Like, if I was looking for that affirmation, I got it. And, at that convention, not only did I reconnect with those old friends, but I also met like a friend of mine who's a photographer who, like, I'm still really good friends with him. He still shoots a lot of my stuff. So it really was like a big turning point for getting back into cosplay. And I actually still use the photo he took of me in that Skyrim armor, because he shot that Skyrim armor outside like a business center in London and made it look like Skyrim. And I still like, there happened to be like a sort of flower bed with some lavender and some long grass and stuff in it. And he positioned me there and then managed to like blur out the buildings enough so they kind of looked like fantasy buildings instead of, modern London. And it was just so cool. And I was just like, my God, like not only have my skills improved, but now there are people doing photography in this space where it's like professional level stuff and it's like portfolio worthy level stuff. So I started putting my cosplay in my portfolio and on my website, and my Instagram took off and everything as well, because I suddenly had like professional quality photos to use.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I miss this, and I miss my friends involved in it, and I'm making new friends involved in it. And even without seeing it as work, it's going to improve stuff for me in my career as well. It's going to give me more stuff to put in my portfolio. It's going to make me learn things that I can then transfer into my theatre work. So yeah, and then, and on top of that as well, like that same friend, shout out to Ollie / Lil Prince on Instagram, was starting up this magazine called The Cosplay Journal, which is still going. And they asked me to do a photo shoot for it with the Skyrim armor and then write an article about like prop and armor making and like mech suits and stuff like that, because they knew I'd done the Transformers stuff. So yeah, it really felt like, I got to a place like in a very accelerated manner where people were considering me like quite high level.
Uh-huh.
And I did like my Aloy cosplay and my Cassandra cosplay, just like really leaning into the armor stuff. And with those ones, I like fully patterned everything by myself. And yeah, I just, it took me a long time to finish cosplays because I had to do it. If I was working on a production for like 3 months solid, I probably wouldn't have time to work on the cosplay at all. Maybe weekends, but then I would be very creatively drained. So it was like slow going at first, but I got to a stage where I could like be consistently working on cosplays and doing photo shoots and attending conventions. And then making the Miss Marvel cosplay was actually kind of a unique challenge for me because like I had really got myself into this niche of doing armor, doing like the Transformers, doing, all these armor builds. And I have actually always, like, while I did get a lot of sewing knowledge quite early, sewing isn't a thing that really like comes as easily to me. I feel like working with the parameters of armor, with the way in which pattern making for it works, with the way the materials work, it's sort of more like sculpting in a way that means I feel like my brain really understands it a lot more easily than sewing, which I feel like sewing and like sewing patterning is actually much more mathematical and technical, which is like kind of not something that comes as easily to me. So making the Miss Marvel costume, for as simple of a costume as it is actually like, it was actually like quite a challenge I set myself, because I really wanted to cosplay that character. She was like so important to me. And I just knew that that making that very simple superhero suit was going to be harder for me than making like my Cassandra armor ever was. And the Aloy cosplay kind of had a crossover, because the Aloy, I did the Nora Lookout outfit, which is quite armored, but most of Aloy's costumes are a mixture of armor and sewing. So I had to do some sewing, but by the nature of the way that costume is designed, the level of sewing it required was actually not that advanced, because the way in which the fabrics are like treated and the clothing making is treated in that game is that it's at like a less advanced level. Like these people have access to like pelts and leather,
right?
You know, they don't have access to sewing machines and stretch fabrics and stuff like that. So like, do you know what I mean? Like what was expected of me in terms of my level of sewing was less than what was expected of me for my level of armor making for that Aloy cosplay. The armor is very advanced and the sewing is less advanced. But yeah, I actually, the same friend again, Ollie, shout out to Ollie again. They came over and we did like a cosplay exchange day where they helped me pattern out the dress for my Miss Marvel cosplay, and I helped them pattern out some armor they wanted to make, because we kind of have like the opposite approaches in cosplay, and that like I'm very armor oriented and they're very sewing oriented. So we just were like, why not help each other out? And yeah, so then I got to make my Miss Marvel cosplay, and like the sewing aspect of it was a bit more of a challenge. Once I got into it, it was like much easier than I was expecting. Just on the level of like, it's quite a simple costume, but I had a lot of fear built up into it, because I was like, oh god, I don't know how to make a superhero costume sewn, like stretch fabrics. But then I still got to use other skills, like to make the bracer and the mask. I was using like armor making skills and mold making skills. Yeah, and then, oh god, what did I make after that? I think I made my Winston cosplay from Watch Dogs Legion, which I never even played, but I saw the game's promos and I was like, oh, people wearing cool masks? Yeah, I'll make something like that. And it was set in London, so I was like, and then I can go and do a photo shoot like in London. Which I think I ended up doing that like in the pandemic because of like the timing on that.
Right.
Yeah, I made like my... Yeah. I finished Winston. I only took it to one convention, didn't really get many photos. And then that was like 2019, October, MCM. So yeah, then, by the time the next MCM would have been, the pandemic had already hit. And during the pandemic, I wanted to keep up working on cosplay and doing my own projects. So I made my Tomb Raider cosplay, which was the suit of armor that Lara gets in the second of the reboot games. And I got to do like lots of chainmail, and armor making is my favorite thing. So yeah, I made that and then did a photo shoot for that and a photo shoot for Winston, like in the pandemic. And for the Winston cosplay, we went to Leicester Square at night, partly because pandemic, it's easier to avoid people, and it's just like me and the photographer and one other person, so we can be relatively sure that we're going to be safe and okay, and also the cosplay happens to involve wearing a mask anyway, so like and then, oh god, what was I saying? Oh yeah, and then on top of that, like central London at night was very much like the aesthetic of the game, but yeah, I just never ended up playing it. So yeah, and then Oh, that was the other. God, I completely skipped over like the pro cosplay stuff in like not even late 2019. Yeah, in 2019, 2018, 2019, I got connected with a community manager at Bethesda because of my Dragonborn cosplay. It was actually, if I remember correctly, it was like a voice actor who had been a guest at TF Nation, which is the Transformers convention that I used to be like one of the organizers of, and I ran the cosplay contest there. So I've skipped over so many things. So yeah, I also have a lot of experience of like running and judging cosplay contests because of that, and then have ended up like guesting at conventions and judging cosplay contests at them and stuff like that as well. It was like a voice actor who I'd like sort of befriended when he was a guest at TF Nation, tagged me in a post with like a community manager from Bethesda who he saw was at the same convention as me and was like, yo, she's at this convention too. She does a really cool Skyrim cosplay. You should check her out or something like that. I'm pretty sure that was it. And then I ended up like meeting up with this guy and like chatting with him, and he followed me on Twitter and then like invited me to the Bethesda office to do like a photo shoot there with the Skyrim cosplay. And then they asked me to go to like QuakeCon in the cosplay as well as a sort of cosplay guest. And they then were like, okay, we've really loved the stuff that we've seen you make. We would really like to commission you for something. We would love to work with you on something. Which I was just like, holy shit, oh, cool. Dream project, yes, please. So what I ended up doing for them was building a Doomslayer suit from Doom Eternal, which was to promote Doom Eternal when it was coming out. So that ended up being like, I ended up making that for a convention that was in October of 2019. Yeah, because that was for EGX 2019. And initially I was going to make like the whole thing plus a sword, and then like time got whittled down and there wasn't enough time to do the whole thing because of like, you know, when you're making a cosplay for yourself, you get to create the timetable. When you're making a cosplay for a company, if they don't send you a contract in time, you don't get a budget, so you can't start working on it. And it was my first time doing that kind of thing, so I was very much just like, I'm not going to do anything until they give me the green light, because I don't want to screw up anything. And I also don't want to spend money and then have the project maybe fall through. But yeah, so I ended up making like the whole armor, but they gave me a helmet that was like the collector's edition helmet to use for the cosplay. And we only had time to make like the arm blade. We didn't have time to make the whole sword. But it was still like really, really cool. I got paid to make a cosplay for a video game company. And initially they actually wanted me to make it for myself to wear. Or like that was what the community managers wanted. And then when they kind of put it to like people slightly higher up who don't really get cosplay, they were like, but she's like a 5'5" woman and Doomslayer is a really tall man. And I was like, I mean, in cosplay, like anyone can cosplay anything pretty much, but I also understand that this is like a promotional thing for a company and it's supposed to like represent that character as he appears in the game. So, so we ended up deciding to hire a model to wear it. So I ended up making this gigantic suit of armor for this. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me calling him gigantic man. He was like 6 foot. He was like 6'7". He was huge. And he was like I think they pulled him from like an extras agency where he had mainly been doing stuff like being an extra in like Viking movies and stuff like that. He was very much like big, muscly, like Viking blonde looking dude.
Right.
Like super sweet guy, really nice to work with. I am short enough that I had to stand on a step ladder to fit him in the armor at like the shoulder armor. I'm not even that short. I'm like average height, but like compared to him, it was just like, yeah, if I want a pattern armor that's on your shoulders, I need to like get a ladder. And yeah, that was so cool. So I was also like then brought to EGX to like sort of be like his costume dresser, but also sort of minder while he was in the costume, because you know it's a big suit of armor. He's wearing a helmet. He can't really see properly. It gets really hot and he needs help taking some of it off, putting it on. And who better to do that than the person who made the thing?
Right.
But I got to walk around with him at EGX. Like they had like the whole Bethesda booth with like all the people who would like line up to play Doom, and we'd like walk through the queue, and he'd take photos of people and like scare people for fun and stuff like that. And then we'd like walk around the convention and sort of like promo the booth by having him like walk around and, you know, do badass Doomslayer-y shit. So yeah, that was really, really cool. And I was supposed to do more promo stuff for Doom Eternal, because I think the release date was actually like March 2020 or April 2020 originally. And well, we all know what happened then.
Yep.
The pandemic hit, and we were going to do like a photo shoot, and there was going to be like a promo night type thing where we'd bring the costume to and have him wear it again, and that just couldn't happen. Which sucks. Like, it would have been a really cool networking event. It would have also just been really fun. But like, pandemic, you know, that's what happens. Everyone kind of lost work overnight. But what did happen was that the pandemic kind of, because I lost all my theatre and that pro cosplay work overnight, I had a lot of time. So after I'd made my Tomb Raider cosplay and done some other like personal projects and stuff, I kind of found myself gravitating towards like, oh, I'd always wanted to try making my own YouTube tutorials, like to see if I could do that, or like making videos about cosplay, about design, about making. But I never had the time because, you know, making cosplay is already time consuming enough when you already have a job that's very time consuming.
Right.
So the pandemic actually gave me the chance to kind of give that a shot. And so, yeah, I had been kind of, I was like a little bit methodical about it. I didn't want to just like run in with no ideas. So I kind of like scripted out a couple videos. I like talked to one of my cousins who's a filmmaker, and I was like, how would you edit this? How would you shoot this kind of thing? Because actually like filming and editing something was something I had not done before. So I kind of wanted to go in with some knowledge. And while I was sort of like planning all of this out, I got some messages from that Bethesda community manager who was like, hey, like, hope you're doing well. And I still want to try and like do a project with you this year. Is there anything we can do that would still allow us to, you know, work remotely and stuff like that? And I was like, well, it just so happens that I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel and experimenting with making some cosplay videos and like fabrication tutorials and stuff like that. Would you be interested in something along those lines, like me making something from a game that's coming out soon and like making a video tutorial for it? And yeah, he was very interested in that. And so the first videos I ended up releasing on my channel when it first started were actually like paid sponsored videos by Bethesda, which wasn't me like fully making a thing from scratch. It was more Doom Eternal stuff. They sent me more of the collector's edition helmets, and I was supposed to like sort of transform them, like customize them, because the game had like a bunch of different skins in it. So I was like painting the helmets to look like a different skin in the game. I did 3 of them, 2 of which were basically just paint jobs, and then one of which, because they let me pick them, one of which was the Doomicorn, which was this like, big, ridiculous, like unicorn-themed character where like it still had the same like Doomslayer helmet, but there was like a big unicorn head on top of it, and it had like a mane and a tail and wings and all this wild stuff on the whole costume. So when he sent me like the list of ones that they would let me choose from, I was like, the Doomicorn is a yes. Like, there is no way I'm not doing the Doomicorn. So that one was probably like the most involved. That was definitely the most involved one I did. That involved me like sculpting an entire horse head onto the helmet. And that video, until very recently, was still my most viewed video on my channel. My video on making foam look like leather has now overtaken it a little bit. I don't know why that video has gained so much traction recently, but recently that video has just like shot up to ridiculous numbers. Yeah, so I had this like wild experience where very rapidly after getting back into cosplay, things just got to this state where I was like, oh, I'm a professional cosplayer, sort of. Which was like not my intention when I but was something that I really like enjoyed and was a good way to make some money. Because, you know, Bethesda have more money than most mid-sized theatre companies in the UK. So, so yeah, and then they got me to do another video. Last year I did another one to promote Fallout 76, where I customized helmets from Fallout 76 to, like, you know, get the bog standard, what's it called, power armor helmet, and then paint it to look like a different one from the new DLC that was coming out. I think it was like Brotherhood of Steel themed. So I made it look like one of the Brotherhood of Steel helmets. So yeah, and then I kept making videos because it was a way to keep myself busy during the pandemic.
Right.
Because I do go a little bit like stuff to do starved very quickly. And, you know, going from I'm a theatre designer and am also doing all this cosplay stuff on the side and all this other stuff. I have a lot to do a lot of the time. I'm very busy, very active social life that I have to like actively maintain, otherwise it falls apart because my job is so busy, to like nothing to do, no one to see, sitting inside my flat all day was like, I mean, it was a shock for everyone. I'm not saying I'm like special or different, but like it was very difficult. And the things that got me through that were definitely like starting off by making my own cosplay projects, doing the YouTube channel, having those projects which also gave me some income, and then also like the TTRPG streaming and getting into that community while the pandemic was a thing was basically what kept me sane. And yeah, like I kind of got to like fulfill a cosplay dream this year when like my Miss Marvel cosplay was noticed enough that I got to go to the Miss Marvel premiere in cosplay, which like that alongside doing the projects for Bethesda, I feel is like the things I'm like the most proud of having gotten to do through cosplay. I think like getting to go to the series premiere for the show of the character that was like my favorite comic character, that got me back into comics, that got me to like feel represented in comics in some way. Like it was just like, it was joyous. I loved it so much. And yeah, I've gotten to do some really cool stuff because of cosplay. Another one was that I got to shoot my Cassandra cosplay at the British Museum. Like that was so cool. That was because of the Cosplay Journal, the magazine that my friend runs. The British Museum had an exhibition about anime and manga and sort of like connected media, and a bunch of cosplayers were actually invited to the like opening for it, which was another cool thing I got to do because of cosplay. Oh my god. And then when we were there, I like went with those friends and we were sort of talking to their like marketing manager, and you know, mentioned like, yeah, this magazine, we like to showcase like the artistry behind cosplay and stuff like that. And she was just like, we should do something. We should totally do something. Which at first we thought was her, you know, kind of going like, yeah. But no, she followed through on it. And then they were like, okay, we want you in your Cassandra cosplay. We're going to shoot your Cassandra cosplay in like the section where they have all the like, you know, Greek stuff in the British Museum. And then another person was there in a Legend of Zelda cosplay, which they shot in the East Asian section, but then we also shot in the actual like anime exhibition, which obviously my cosplay wasn't related to anime and theirs was more related to anime, but like it was still like so cool. So yeah, I have like these amazing photos of my Cassandra cosplay among like actual Greek relics, which is so mind-blowing and cool to me. And then also like a lot of the architecture at the British Museum is sort of faux Greek, so we did a lot of photos like outside with the pillars and like going up the stairway with the Greek architecture visible behind it, and that was like so cool. So yeah, you know, back when I was at uni studying theatre design and people used to kind of huff and puff about cosplay a little bit, now I'm like, well, a lot of the coolest things I've gotten to do in my career have been because of cosplay, frankly.
Exactly. And your work is so beautiful to look at. And it's just like, it just draws you in the work that you have created and put out there.
Thank you.
It is amazing stuff. And if you're not following is on her Instagram. You should definitely at least do that and then dive into more of the stuff that she's got out there.
Thank you.
Now, you did mention getting into tabletop role playing.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to wrap up with, is talking about that. Like, it was this like just recently, like you just recently got into tabletop role playing for the first time ever?
I guess I first got like properly into tabletop games in like 2019. Like actually playing them in 2019. I had a couple of times played some D&D and some Dungeon World and some Scum and Villainy before that, but it was all very sort of local friendship group, half of whom are taking it seriously, half of whom are just here to get high and hang out with their friends and pretend they're a cleric, which is cool. Everyone comes in with different expectations. But, I was like, I'm enjoying the part where we come over and we'll get drunk beforehand. But I would also like to play the game while we're not intoxicated sometimes.
Right.
Because I kind of like the idea of making a character and getting into character and role-playing and thinking about who this person is. And that very much comes from the, like, I always like to design characters kind of thing. When you're doing costume design, you are fundamentally thinking about who that person is because you're thinking about how they outwardly express themselves. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, but just kind of didn't have a group to play with where I felt like I was like getting everything I wanted from it, which is cool. But also like many TTRPG campaigns do, they just kind of like fizzled out and crumbled apart, which again is fine. But yeah, and like, sadly, my sort of process of getting into TTRPGs properly is like somewhat like fraught for me to think about now as well, because I did kind of I started out with some like playing with some friends of mine over Discord and stuff like that, but then through some cosplay, then friends of mine ended up being asked to be on like a D&D actual play, which was when I very much got into like D&D and being and like sort of the breadth of it and the community and like following people in the RPG community online and like learning about discourse in the space and the history of TTRPGs and like who were the big players in the space and stuff like that. But I actually ended up leaving that actual play because of some stuff that happened to do with racism and some other not so great things. But by the time that happened, it was already the pandemic, and I had already, through the first sort of little bit of the pandemic, been utilizing, or like not utilizing, but like having opportunities thrown my way to like be on some other streams and podcasts and stuff to do with TTRPGs, because of like, I mean, when I think about it, a lot of it goes back to like one networking event I went to in January of 2020, which was to promote that show that I ended up leaving. But I met, a person who I'd been mutuals with on Twitter, met him in person there, got along really well, met a few other people, met another person who I ended up doing a lot of streaming with throughout the pandemic. That first person who'd actually like told me about the event and recommended I go ended up inviting me onto a stream that he was GMing. And I then ended up streaming with those people for like a year or a year and a half. And I actually like met my current partner through that stream, which is really cool. And so, yeah, so by the time all that stuff, kind of the negative stuff, culminated, I had kind of made enough friends and made enough connections in the space that I didn't feel like it meant that space wasn't for me anymore. Because that was always the fear as a woman of color, as a queer woman of color, that like there's a lot of stuff about tabletop games and D&D in particular that kind of has a neon sign on it that suggests this is not for you. And so if I hadn't made connections with people like Asians Represent and done podcasts with them, if I hadn't done the D&D and Quest streams with that one group, if I hadn't made all these other friends in the space, a lot of whom were people of color, who I could have these conversations with about bioessentialism and racism and Orientalism, then when all that stuff kind of happened and fell apart, I probably would have just slunk away and been like, nah, I can't handle this space. I just can't be bothered with like the level of racism that is present here.
Right.
But because I could see that there was this other side to it, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed playing tabletop games. I really enjoyed creating characters and backstories and connections with the other player characters, and all of that often being entrenched in like fantasy worlds and sci-fi worlds and sci-fantasy worlds, and you know, that stuff I was talking about earlier that I really love, that I can literally like pinpoint back to Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger and games like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do acknowledge that like the tabletop gaming space has like a huge problem with the way it treats people of color in particular, and women. But there are people who you can have in-depth conversations with about those things, where you actually get to like feel like you're making headway as opposed to just screaming at a brick wall. And the thing I've learned is to like, there are some people, it's the thing I learned about, you know, discussing feminism back when I was like 22, 23, is that there are some people who are just never going to listen, and they're only out to antagonize you, and they're only out to try and gotcha you, you know? And sadly, most of the time, you might think you can change some people's minds, and you can change some people's minds, but there are telltale signs that there are some people's minds you just can't change. So just ignore them and focus on having productive conversations in the space in the way that you need to, you know? So yeah, I felt very lucky that I had found spaces already where I could do that at that point. And yeah, really enjoyed streaming tabletop games outside of, you know, some of the bad shit I had to endure from that one group of people. Once I was with groups where I felt like I was like appreciated and where we wanted the same things from it, like I just hit the ground running, and I just did like stream after stream after stream. And again, it was that thing of like, it's the pandemic, I have nothing to do. I need a social life. I need a social life. And tabletop gaming, both my home games, I had like 2 home games running at the time, and the streams I was on, that was my social life in the pandemic, basically. Because I found that, like, I don't know if you found this, but in the pandemic, when I would just like hop on a Zoom call with a friend with no real goal in mind other than catching up, we would just talk about the pandemic, and it would just make us miserable.
Yeah, it was not a good time back then. Like, especially like I work remote anyway, so I'm always at home. But then it's like, oh, well now everyone's at home with me, and they're not going to school, or my wife isn't going to her work, and it's like, okay, here I am.
Yeah, and I live on my own, so yeah, I was, you know, admittedly very lonely through a lot of the pandemic, and then you couple that with like, you know, some bad stuff going down among a group of people who I considered my friends, and it starts to get to you a lot. But I luckily had like home game groups with really good friends of mine, and streams where I was making new friends, and that were also leading to work opportunities as well. And that gave me my social life throughout the pandemic. So that is the thing that I'm like, that I really loved about TTRPGs. And yeah, then on top of that, like again with the cosplay thing, it just, I felt like maybe it was luck, maybe it was me bringing something to the table that people really liked, but I got a lot of opportunities quicker than I would have imagined I might have, to do some paid streams, to do some like quite big like stuff. Like last year I got to be on D&D Celebration on a stream with 3 Black Halflings, which was like wild. And I got that through like a friend of mine who I made in the TTRPG space through streaming with him, who, you know, you give, I had like suggested him for that stream, and then he was like, yeah, I want to recommend you for stuff because you gave me one of my first opportunities. And then I got, that ended up with him recommending me for fucking D&D Celebration, which is like, holy shit, dude. And yeah, like made so many friends, got to do like so many cool things. and be on like multiple different streams and podcasts, like Three Black Halflings and Asians Represent and Chromatic Chimera. Me and some friends got together and put together like a Indiegogo to fund a Spire stream that we all did together. So we actually got to like pay ourselves, and I did the artwork for it, like the character artwork and stuff. And yeah, I did like a few things where I was doing like character art for streams. You know, in the pandemic, when you lose all your theatre work, you get income wherever you can. Well, I really like drawing fantasy characters, so like, yeah. And that was the other thing about TTRPGs, was that it got me back into drawing for pleasure as well. Because, like I said, like, drawing became this thing where I just associated it with work, which is not pleasant, because like before that I just drew every day. I drew all the time. I went to life drawing classes. I just drew. And then when it became work, suddenly I found myself being only able to draw when it was for work, and feeling guilty when I drew not for work, which is like ridiculous. And then on top of that, I also had an injury in 2017 at work, like on a job, where I injured, like, at first I thought it was my wrist and my hand, but it was actually an injury in my shoulder where like the pain was being received down the nerves in my arm. And I had to do like a lot of physiotherapy to like crawl the pain back to my shoulder and then like fix the actual injury. And that meant that I couldn't draw for a really long time as well. But I could make things, that was another aspect of like the cosplay stuff, was like, okay, well, I can't do like intensive drawing, but I can draw to the level where I can draw a pattern, and then I can make armor, because that's not the same kind of, it didn't trigger off the pain, basically. So yeah, I just kind of gotten out of drawing and getting back into tabletop games. The first thing I wanted to do was draw my characters, was design my characters. And, you know, I'm the sort of player who, I come to if I have a character idea, I will arrive at the session 0 with a Pinterest board ready, maybe a sketch. But, you know, and if I come up with my character throughout the session 0, then I come to session 1 with a Pinterest board ready and an idea of what this character looks like and what they wear and what their weapon looks like and what their familiar looks like and stuff like that, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. So it really, like, it sparked off that, like, creative joy. And I think actually, like, now that I think about it, we talked about prosthetics earlier. I made the decision to go to study prosthetics around like October last year, I think it was. So by the time this comes out, about a year. And now that I think about it, like, some of the things that built up to me making that decision to specifically specialize in prosthetics was like the cosplay stuff I was working on, the builds I was making for my channel. A lot of it involved sculpting and painting, and that was the stuff I really loved. But then I think about TTRPGs and how into that I was, and how into designing characters who are like fantastical people that I was. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's part of it too, definitely. Like drawing lots of like orcs and genasi and stuff, like when most of prosthetics is designing like monsters, creatures, fantasy people, aliens and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, like there's definitely a connection there as well. So yeah, I feel like, I don't know what it took me so long to get into TTRPGs. I think partly because of the whole thing of like finding groups to play with can be hard when you don't already know the TTRPG space. And then among your local friends, if people don't want to play in the same kind of way or aren't as committed, that can be tough. But also, sadly, because of like sexism and racism, like that was just the idea I had, because I had played like a single game of D&D when I was like 12 and felt very gate-kept and judged for being like a 12-year-old girl, wanting to do 12-year-old girl things and have fun in a game, you know?
Right.
And you see that same level of gatekeeping, you know, in video games, in Star Wars fandom, Star Trek fandom, like everywhere. You see it everywhere because sexism and racism is everywhere. But there is like this very particular way in which it hits in TTRPGs, I think, that feels particularly painful, for me at least, I think, because you are playing a character that you yourself have made and are presenting, and it's sort of like presenting like an idea about yourself to other people, and then when that gets responded to with like gatekeeping behavior or racist behavior or misogynistic behavior, there's something about that, I think, that just hits a little bit harder than just, wow, girls can't play video games. And yeah, and then, you read through the books and you see all the racism and the racial coding and the sexism that's just like baked right on in. And it's hard to feel like you're welcome. But there are definitely people who make it their like business to make the space more welcoming, and that is something I'm very grateful for.
Absolutely. Now, out of curiosity, because we're talking just tabletop role-playing games in general, do you have any favorite games in particular that you gravitate towards?
Yeah, I play a lot of D&D, but D&D is far from my favorite. I really, really love Quest. It was the game I streamed with that one group for like a whole year and a half throughout the pandemic. And it's firstly, it's a really fun game in its own right, and the artwork they have for the books is so cool. But the thing I really loved about it when we started playing it was that it's a fantasy game that just does away with all the like bioessentialism. You don't pick a race. Your race has no bearing on your character. You just pick like your role and your abilities, and that's how you build your character. So it allowed me to feel less like I had to kind of justify decisions I wanted to make about my character's appearance and my character's ethnicity and all that kind of stuff. So it's just, and then on top of that, it kind of streamlines the whole experience in this really satisfying way where like, it's still a D20 game. It's still a game where you roll a D20 and the number determines whether you succeed or fail, and then you have combat and use abilities and blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of stuff that's recognizable to anyone who's familiar with like the classic fantasy tropes. Like you have a fighter, you have a wizard, you have a doctor, you have an invoker who's basically a paladin, and a naturalist who's basically a druid. But they streamline the whole mechanics process so well. It does away with a lot of the stuff that I frankly find like very overwrought in D&D. Like D&D is just very overpacked with a lot of rules it probably doesn't need, but it keeps around because it's a legacy game. So,
right.
And a lot of spells that everyone just knows are bad, and no one uses them, and everyone talks about how bad they are. And subclasses that everyone's just like, this subclass is just dreadful, or this race is like objectively weaker than all these other ones, or this class is objectively weaker than all these other ones. But they're allowed to get away with it because it's a legacy thing. No other game could get away with that, I don't think. Maybe Pathfinder, maybe. and oh god, what's it called? My boyfriend like complains about it all the time. Oh my god, what is it? It's like the cyberpunk game that's like really overly complex and ridiculous. And I'm just completely forgetting its name.
I'm trying to think of it.
Shadowrun.
Okay, yes. Oh gosh, yeah.
Shadowrun and Pathfinder are probably the only other ones that can get away with it. And from what I've heard, I think Pathfinder is actually more streamlined than D&D, maybe. But yeah, it's just like, it's such a fun game. And the way that they do away with like the racism, they do away with some of the Eurocentricity by changing some of the character names. Like there's no paladin, so you don't have the association with like crusades. They're an invoker. It's not, it's a way of just kind of neutralizing it a bit that I really appreciate. And then on top of that, it really celebrates like in the rules book, they have stuff about how to play cooperatively and how to appropriately take up space at the table and make sure everyone is having fun. And yeah, it's a really, really fun game. I highly recommend people give it a chance, especially if they want to check out a fantasy game that doesn't do the bioessentialism stuff and is like more easy to learn. So for example, I know a lot of people have used it with like kids in schools to teach them about role-playing games because it's easier for them to get a grasp on than D&D and a lot of the other ones. And I ran a game of it for my family over Christmas in 2020. Was it the first year of the pandemic? Or 2021? One of the Christmases during the pandemic where we couldn't have any other family over. Yeah, sorry, it was 2020. And so my brother has like tangential knowledge of tabletop games, but had never played one before. My parents, clueless. My mum has watched Stranger Things.
Right.
My dad used to be a theatre director, so he thought he understood what it was going to be, and then he tried to be the GM, and I was like, Dad, you're not the GM. I'm the GM. You're a player character. Stop directing. It was very fun. But they were able to pick it up like relatively quickly, even with the lack of experience and knowledge, because the game makes it very easy to pick up and play, which I really, really love. And then another one I really enjoyed, I only played it once, but it was one that like I felt was a really interesting look at, like, again, in that same way that Journey and Edith Finch are like, oh, this is a really different thing video games can be. It was that one of those early ones for me that was like, oh, this is a really different thing that tabletop games can be, which was Dialect, which is a game where you like create and destroy a language. It's so cool.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's I played it on stream like one time. I had never heard of it before. It's really, really fun, and definitely like it has some like dystopian vibes, which I think is really cool, because it's basically about like you like I said, you create and destroy a language, and there are like multiple different sort of settings that you can pick in which to do it.
Okay.
And they're all very different. The one we happened to pick was like people colonizing Mars, and it's about like when a spaceship full of people go to Mars and then spend decades away from Earth, away from everything they know. How does the language change and evolve? How does it change and evolve in relation to what they are attempting to do on Mars, which was like create a colony that's like a safe place for humans to live, with the Earth failing, basically, was what we decided. So you make up a lot of stuff, and it's also very like communal led. I think because one person had played the game and the rest of us hadn't when I played it, we did have one person sort of guiding us a little bit more in the fashion of a GM, but it is intended that everyone, and you know, as we became more comfortable, everyone would lead together, sort of thing.
Right.
Really interesting. And it also, like, I would love to play it again and like, you know, play some of the other like story prompts and stuff like that, because there's like so many different ones. Like, they're not all dystopian. It was just a lot of them happened to be, because I think that kind of fits it. But I think there were some that were like hackers speaking to each other over a internet network and stuff like that, you know. And yeah, it's really creative, and I feel like it's a game that really like gets creative juices flowing, is really interesting and different, you know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about the tabletop role-playing community, is that we've evolved from Dungeons and Dragons hack and slash to games where it's basically you can do anything in any game, in any type of game, and it's so incredible to see like the creativity that people are putting out with like the work that they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I was able to play more indie games and stuff like that. I admittedly, you know, while being one of those people who's like, people should play games other than D&D, I play a lot of D&D. I do enjoy playing D&D. I like messing around with the mechanics. I like building characters in the way that D&D asks you to build characters. Yes, it's very bioessentialist, but on like a mechanics crunchy level, it can be fun. But I also love that there's so much other stuff out there. You know, like I've played Starcrossed a couple times, which is like a game designed for two people where you play characters who fall in love with each other, and you decide like how they fall in love with each other and like how the relationship builds. And it could be like a rom-com, or it could be like a tragic romance, or it could be like a space opera romance. It could be like anything. I think one time I played it, it was like in preparation for a game of Aegon that we were going to be playing, which is like a Greek mythology game. So me and one of the other players had decided we were going to play two characters who were a couple. And so she suggested that we play a game of Starcrossed to like sort of blitz through role-playing out how our two characters became a couple, which was really, really interesting. So using a game as a tool to facilitate something in another game is like another thing that was like kind of new to me at the time. And that was really good, because it gave us some really good basis for role-playing against. You know, you go into a game where you're supposed to be playing, they weren't married, but they were like an established couple. with some Greek mythology weirdness thrown in there, where my character was a sculptor who had first sculpted a sculpture that came to life, and then she fell in love with her because, you know, Pygmalion and
Right.
Lesbians. But it gave us the ability to be able to be like, we know this fact about how these characters interact with each other, instead of having to kind of like and ah through it in a streamed game. It meant that we could come in very strong with like an established relationship where they had like cute little quirks and nicknames for each other, and could reminisce about dates they'd been on and things that had happened and stuff like that. And then another time I actually played it as a date with my current partner, when we were first like going out, and it was just like, we thought it would be a fun thing to do, to like play out characters falling in love while we ourselves are dating. And it was really sweet. We did like a superhero story, but where it was like, one was the villain and one was a hero, star-crossed lovers, blah blah blah, which was like really goofy and fun. But then also like, it's really nice thing to play with your partner as well, because it teaches you a lot about like communicating in relationships while you're playing it. It's really cool. And yeah, the fact that you can have something like that, which is like, I guess in a way like fundamentally opposite from a lot of the things that D&D does, because while yes, D&D is about like creating a party and the party's relationship to each other in a way, it is also essentially a game where you go around and kill people and steal their stuff. Like, right. Mechanically, that is what it is. And everything else is kind of what the players make it in a way. And Starcrossed mechanically is a game about people building love. So yeah, I think it's just really interesting that you can have these like really cool, really different games out there. And there's a few things that I'm like looking forward to playing, like things some of my friends are working on and stuff like that. And I've even ended up writing a D&D supplement, F to me. We'll see if it ever gets finished. It's not just me writing it, I'm writing it with someone else, so like I'm held accountable. But
Gotcha.
yeah, no, giving my own take on how to better address certain races in D&D, because I talk the talk, let's see if I can walk the walk, you know?
Absolutely. Now, Izza, we have been talking. We've had a marathon episode.
We have,
and I can only let you know how appreciative I am that you have divulged so much awesome, cool stuff that we've been talking about. But for those people who are like, okay, I've heard her talk about all this stuff, I need to go follow her. I need to check out what she actually does. What are the best places for them to check you out?
Yeah. So firstly, I'm sorry, because whenever I do podcast stuff, everyone jokes.
It's okay.
If you invite Izza on a podcast, it will be your longest episode because I just won't shut up. But yeah, if people have been, if I have sparked interest in you, then if you want to check out some of my other stuff, I mainly use Twitter and Instagram, and I have my YouTube channel. All of them are EvilCleverDog. My YouTube is, at the time of recording, geared towards doing like cosplay and fabrication videos. I don't really know what I will be doing with it while I'm on my course, because I won't have the space and time probably to do like build videos anymore. But we'll see. You can also just go check out my other videos, give me some retroactive views. And then yeah, Twitter and Instagram is where I'll post like stuff I'm making and opinions about tabletop games on Twitter, not Instagram, because Instagram's bad for that.
Right.
And you could also check out some of the stuff I've done with the Asians Represent podcast. They have a YouTube where they keep like a log of all the streams and podcasts that we've done. Let me just check what their actual YouTube thing is, because it's different in different places. But yeah, I have hosted their episodes on mixed race representation in D&D and fantasy media. I got like a whole group of like different mixed race people from our community together to discuss like many things about mixed race representation in fantasy and D&D, because it's dire, you guys. So people might be interested in that. I also did a couple of episodes with them about like costume and fashion and cosplay, stuff like Orientalist costume design tropes and unpacking them and like where they come from and stuff like that. So if anyone's interested in a sort of like history of fashion and culture type look at like costume in fantasy media, like that might interest you. Their YouTube channel URL is AZNS Represent, like youtube.com/AZNS Represent. So yeah, if that is of interest to people, I'm quite proud of like the stuff I've done with them, and it was one of the things that sort of made me feel like I had a place in tabletop gaming. So I'm always willing to shout them out as well, even if you don't watch the stuff that I've done.
Awesome. I'll make sure to have the links, not only to Asians Represent's work, but also, Iz's work. All her links will be all in the show notes. That way you can click on each of them and make sure to, follow and comment and like and do all the things that you're supposed to do, because, the algorithm is the worst. And you need to make sure that you at least say like, hey, how's it going or something.
Yeah.
But Izza, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking about the stuff that you are so passionate about. And I can only wish you the best in your MA work that you're about to start. And I hope it is going well.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on and for letting me ramble for 2 hours, 10 minutes, 36 seconds about about a lot of things. I had a lot of fun, so thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.